I'd like to know which creates more dust, manual filing or e-filing, and which types of dust should I avoid? Dust happens with all types of filing, without exceptions. Now here are several important things that nail technicians must know. It's not about the amount of dust that's generated. When it comes to dust, the size of the individual particles is even more important. Why? Well, large particles tend to fall onto your lap or onto the tabletop or even on the floor. Now, these may be messy to clean up, but if they're in your lap, then they aren't floating around in your breathing space where they can be inhaled. The smallest particles are the ones that can end up in your lungs, not the largest. The smaller the particle, the greater the inhalation risk. Now, I've done studies that show that some artificial nail dust float around in the air for up to 45 minutes or more. Nail plate filing dust have been shown by others to remain in the air for up to 10 hours. The longer that these are in the air, the greater the chance of inhaling them. Many of these particles are too small to really see. These nearly invisible dust can be about 10 to 100 times narrower than the thickness of a hair. And it's these nearly invisible dusts that pose the greatest risk when inhaled repeatedly over many months or years. Also, the smaller the particle, the deeper it can be inhaled into the lung, which also increases the risk to the nail technician. E-files break larger particles into very tiny particles, which is why e-files can produce a greater inhalation risk. However, this isn't always true, and safety depends on other factors as well. For instance, the so-called acrylic nails have much harder surfaces, and they tend to create finer dust than the softer UV-cured products. But make no mistake, I should say. Both of these can create very fine dust. And so can filing on a nail plate or even the hardened skin of a callus. Also, the type of electric file bit that you use can make a really big difference. Sanding bands and diamond bits tend to create the finest dust, while carbide bits create much lower amounts of these fine dust. Carbide bits shave the surface and create mostly the larger, heavier particles. Even so, all types of manual and e-filing can create inhalable dust. So it's important to protect yourself from long-term overexposure while working in a salon. One way is use an e-file oil while filing, e-file oil. Oils formulated for use with e-files can coat the tiniest particles and prevent them from getting into the air by making the individual particles heavier or even by binding them together into small clusters. This keeps them out of the air and greatly reduces the potential for inhalation. An important recommendation is to use proper and effective types of ventilation, such as source capture ventilation, as well as wearing a properly fitted dust mask, such as those that have ratings of N95 or FFP2. These ratings help you understand which mask can lower your inhalation to safe levels. Don't bother with surgical masks that doctors use, since these won't protect you from any dust or any vapors. It isn't necessary to prevent all exposure to dust in order to be safe. Instead, nail technicians need to use the information I'm providing so they can lower their exposure to safe levels.